Another new side of Matt Rhule. What is this? A TV host? That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, the way you said that in the cold open, Mitch, reminded me of what is this? A center for ants or something like that in Zoolander. But we begin this Tuesday show. Welcome everybody. Connor Happer.
It was not a call out.
From 1620 The Zone. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Happy Tuesday. So yeah, we're starting to see a burgeoning new social media series here for Matt Rhule and the fine folks behind the scenes in the creative media department over there. And the bit that is emerging is when Matt Rhule takes his long walks around the field, as he famously has for a while now, but famously because he got called out for not shaking people's hands or acknowledging them during the Iowa game during his walk last year. So there's, I guess, a little bit of lore here, but we've got a few quote unquote episodes of Rhule walking around and showing different sides of the program, including yesterday, which he gave us a behind the scenes look at some injured players and their progress and the things that they go through behind the scenes. So I go back and forth in this, Mitch, not to like, just steer it in this direction right off the bat. We oftentimes talk about how Matt Rhule has full and complete understanding of exactly every detail of what he's doing. So in this case, like, I think they know what they're showing off and things like that. It's not a mistake that you see the things that you see in these videos, but sometimes I just feel like Rhule is like, bleep it. Let's have some fun. We're at camp. We're trying to keep it a little bit light, and stuff like that. So I don't feel like this has been like totally pointed in any way, shape, or form. He had a video where he was walking around with Emmitt Johnson as well, talked about how he's been losing some weight and working out and things like that. I don't know, but this has been a cool thing to follow so far.
Yeah, reshaping his body, like in the inspired by his quarterback who did this early in the offseason, right. Now late in the offseason. Matt Rhule, we learned in this video that he told, this is from Saturday night after the Big Red preview, Matt Rhule and Emmitt Johnson took a walk around the stadium as things wrapped up with the event in front of the fans. And you got to see one of the guys on the team that I think Matt Rhule and really everybody who is around Nebraska football can have a great rapport with. Emmitt Johnson is just, he has the personality that is fun to show to the public.
Agreed.
Some guys are just more private in their football playing personalities, and unless you're in the locker room, it's hard to really get to know them. And Emmitt Johnson is not one of those guys. Emmitt, like, as soon as you meet him, you feel he puts people at ease. So he was a great first pick for Matt Rhule to do this walk around the field with. And I don't know if they're going to do this more. I don't know if they do it when they get into the season, if it becomes something that's more regular. I do think you'll see more of Matt Rhule mic'd up, walking around various areas of the practice environment. And we got more of that on Monday. But back to the Saturday night thing, Rhule told Emmitt, who remarked that the coach was in good shape, that he had promised the team he would work out every day until, what was it, Connor, the end of preseason camp? So
yeah,
I think he said
the start of the season, right?
Yeah. So, and not like he's gonna then completely stop, but that coach is busy. So
game changes a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, he does look good. He made light of the EA Sports version of Matt Rhule, and they showed a little side by side, and this stuff all has a purpose. And I think the video on Monday also had a purpose. Rhule is mic'd up on the edge of the practice field, and he just slides right into the weight room, like, oh, one step and I'm in the weight room. Like, that cool. In itself is an incredible thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like that is one thing that they've done a pretty good job, I think, of showing off. Like if you wanted to, you could put together a nice, a blueprint or something like that of the exact dimensions and layout of the new practice facility, which is fantastic. But no, I think this is a pretty cool behind the scenes look, and Rhule is he as we've talked about before, he has a pretty acute understanding of what's being talked about out there. But I do think this is we talked about this because I think we got the question in a mailbag several weeks ago now about what players and what people inside of the walls of the facility hear and what they see. I think this is a pretty good example of everything, they know what people are talking about. And
true.
Have a pretty keen understanding of what's on the fan base's minds. They see the same stuff. I mean, it's not like Twitter changes for them just because they're on the football team. Like it looks the same as everybody else's. So they see the stuff. And I think Rhule, takes a couple scrolls through there a day and sees what people are talking about. And if he has the chance to subtly address it in one of these videos, then he takes that opportunity more often than not.
He doesn't even have to look through it. And I'd kind of hope that he's not. He's mentioned in the past that he takes that app off of his phone when the season starts and then puts it back on in recruiting time in December so he can communicate with the recruits in that way. And you don't see Matt Rhule being the one, or at least I guess I didn't look, but I don't think it's Matt Rhule who's posting this or reposting it. It's all coming from the main Nebraska football accounts. So they have plenty of people. I mean, you could walk up to just about anybody who works in there and say, what are people talking about on the outside? And they're going to know as well as we know. And you guys know who are listening and watching. But Rhule goes into the weight room on Monday at practice. And like I said, you could not walk into the weight room from practice anytime before last season in the last 60 years of Nebraska football.
You had about a quarter-mile walk over to the across a bridge, down some stairs, and
Let's just consider for a second the advantage that is. That if there are position coaches who are on the field and there's a break for the players to get a drink of water and they want to slide in and see what their injured guys are doing, or they're like truly rehabbing players, or maybe it's just somebody who's out for a day and is getting in a lift. You couldn't do that before. You had to walk a great distance. Or the players who are hurt can feel way more connected to the team because they're just steps away from the practice field when they're on their rehab assignments. So Rhule opens the door, or somebody opens it for him, and he goes in, and the first player who he walks up to is Demetrius Bell. Well, he just got asked about Demetrius Bell on Saturday at the media availability. Like, where's Demetrius? What's going on? And Rhule tried to explain, hey, he's working his way back. It was a little vague, a little cloudy. Like, maybe not vague. Like, he went to see a specialist, and but it's unclear. Like, oh, has he had a setback? What exactly is the situation? Well, here you go. Here's Demetrius Bell right here. The best thing I can do is show you. He's lifting weights. Like, looked great. Looked like he's been in the weight room for most of the last 2 years. Like, big upper body, was in shape. Like, looks like he could play safety at this moment. And then a couple steps over, there's Jamarian Parker, a guy that we haven't seen on the practice field this month and haven't heard a lot about. And there's some uncertainty. Like, does Jamarian Parker have, like, what's his spot? Well, here he is. He's lifting weights, and Rhule makes a comment about how much size he's added since he got to Nebraska last year in the winter. And we still don't know everything that Jamarian Parker has dealt with and what he's going through. Like, they haven't been specific about the kind of injury that he had. But here you can see him for yourself with the head coach. He's sitting down on the bench rack, and then he goes over and he sees Nolan Fennessy, an offensive lineman who's hurt. He sees Tyson Terry, a defensive lineman who had ACL surgery in the spring. He sees Connor Keneally, a defensive lineman who tore his ACL last year during bull practice. Like, this is a great way for the head coach to kind of update people on, like, what's going on with the players that you're not hearing about every day.
Yeah, it's cool. No doubt about it. I think that is It's definitely like an interactive way to do so. The injuries as they were vaguely described by Rhule were like, these are the guys in the weight room. They're sort of separated. And like you said, I think it's a great point about them being isolated and less so from being physically less far away from team activity. Like that's a really good point. But they were described as like, these are the long-term guys, the guys who have been sort of rehabbing for a while and are probably, depending on where they're at in their injury timeline, getting closer and closer to football related activities, at which point it's a slow integration process. You saw the guys in the yellow jerseys and the stationary bikes, and I think they're I think they're taking their time with some of those guys, with some nagging soft tissue stuff early in camp, especially with older guys. So I don't think there's a whole lot to be concerned about on that front, but you get to see it, right? What's a day in the life for them when you're on a soft tissue injury, or maybe even some sort of like a modified load management type of plan. Like that's cool. That's a good nuts and bolts way to see it.
This stuff works for two reasons. One, because Rhule's really good at it, and there aren't a lot of coaches who just naturally you could mic up and have them walk around and kind of narrate behind the scenes of camp. Like you remember, he almost went into TV, or at least he looked at that during his downtime after he was fired by the Carolina Panthers in 2022. Like that was one of his options, and one of the options I think that he gave real consideration to before Trev Alberts got him to come to Nebraska. And then two, it works because Nebraska has the people to make it work. It's not all just Rhule. Jordan Litton, who was the guy behind the Chasing 3 stuff that Nebraska did for quite a while and was a big feature of camp last year, he went to UCF, so he's reunited with Scott Frost. Nebraska still has Warren May, who's been in that department for a few years, and then it hired Steven Gonzalez. He was at Big Ten Media Days with the Huskers, a young social media type, a guru, a director, somebody who's making decisions about what this kind of content looks like. 2020 Arizona grad. So we should know who these people are because they have a big impact on the program. Today more than ever, you really can't separate what a head coach does from also being out there and being a salesman, and he can't make it work unless he's got good people holding the camera and coming up with ideas.
No doubt about it. So if you learned anything from this part of the episode, shout out to all of our social media people out there. It's a tough job sometimes, but it's an important one, that's for sure. All right, we'll take a break here. On the other side, are we in our own bubble or are we not after this?
Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? I think most people probably do. And with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It is like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Track all your accounts, your investments, your spending in one place if you choose to take advantage of Monarch Money's features. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. You can have one place, one app where you go to make managing everything easier on both a day-to-day level and long term. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Locked On Nebraska podcast on a Tuesday in August. Mitch Sherman with you, along with Connor Happer. This is the time in camp, and I'd say maybe for the next 10 to 12 days before you really get focused in on week one, when sometimes it's hard to see outside the window of your own house. People will call it the bubble, and I don't really like that, because I think to say that we live in a bubble in the Nebraska football world is like suggesting that you're a person who doesn't have a good understanding of what's happening outside of Lincoln in college football. And I suppose for some that can be the case, but
that is for some people true. Yes,
it is. I hope it's not for us. I hope we understand, from events like Big Ten Media Days and following the landscape that every program has good players. Every program has guys who are making gains and who are doing the things on and off the field that make people optimistic about Nebraska right now. So you can't just be moving forward. You've got to be moving forward at a pace that's greater than what your competition is moving forward. Like, if you don't know what you're up against, it's impossible to properly assess what's inside of your own bubble.
I'll tell you what's a big helper though, Mitch, before we go on, like the watch the Big Ten network right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the camp series they do a really good job. Obviously it's short, digestible, half hour. Like I watched Minnesota's last night. Can't wait to see the rest of the conference. So even though, I think that's a good thing that you could do. And then, you know, taking in all the rest of the stuff, there's only so much you can do, but conference wide, and it's increasingly difficult because it's a large conference. There's 18 teams, but there is a little bit of that, but hopefully we do, like you said, we do a good job of not quite being so much in it.
So here's an exercise that I think can help remove the bubble just a bit. A big picture question that I think is right for this moment in camp. Nebraska is closer at this moment to a turnaround than at any time since when?
A turnaround?
Meaning like making the kind of leap that is going to get it's not always about what other people think, but it's a good way to judge it here. Making the kind of leap that's going to get the attention of people nationally to say, oh, well, Nebraska's a team that we need to pay attention to.
Preseason 2019.
Okay. Wow. You're going to go all the way back there.
Yeah. Is that what you meant? Yeah. Or did you just mean in the Rhule era?
Well, no, I'm absolutely not, because I think the first question, at least for me, is Nebraska closer to clearing that hurdle than at any time in the Matt Rhule era? Because you could say no. You could say no. Last year, in year 2 for Rhule, they were on the cusp. Like, they had 5-star quarterback. You know, he was a freshman, but we're not going to. That's not what we're focusing on here. That's not what people were focusing on at the time. They were giving themselves reasons to believe why the 5-star quarterback could take Nebraska to the next level in his first year. It was year 2 for Rhule. You got rid of the cobwebs. Like, here we go. Now they're going to take off. Like, you could have said that then and still believe today that they were closer at that moment than they are right now. Like, that's your prerogative if you believe that.
There's different levels of breakthrough. Like, I mean, maybe you consider what Nebraska did last year a breakthrough. They went to a bowl game and won it. And that was an important step, I think for them. But I remember, I just remember people, especially after 18 in Frost's first year, where they won 4 of their last 6 and they almost beat Ohio State and they almost beat Iowa. And it was like, yeah, this thing is going to go. And they had all the pieces and they were preseason ranked in the top 25. And Adrian Martinez was a Heisman, not just a candidate. He was like in there, as far as the odds are concerned, like a top, 5 to 10 Heisman guy before the season. It was just like, yeah, there's no reason why this doesn't really go. And then they blew a lead against Colorado and it never really got off the ground. But if you go back to that moment before that season started, I think there was a lot of people thinking this is going to really take off and they're in position to do so. And I think people are kind of right there right now. Nationally, I at least that's what I've, come to kind of understand about what people think about Nebraska this year. I heard Phil Steele talk a lot yesterday, and he was on the Big Ten Network. He was asked specifically if there's a Big Ten team who's like a dark horse playoff candidate, and he said Nebraska, and I don't think that's that far out of the realm of possibility. And so I think there's a lot of people think that can be Nebraska's ceiling this year, and that I don't know if there was that many people saying that last year. Less so, I feel like the jump feels like to a different level maybe this year.
Yeah, I think they're at a higher point than at any time in the Rhule era. Like, that answer for 100%. Me is pretty easy. It was maybe difficult to project that at the end of the season last year when Nebraska went through some of the struggles that it did. Like, when the first thing that happens in the offseason is your defensive coordinator, who's been the most consistent piece of your staff for 2 years, leaves for Florida State, which just had an awful season. It is easy, I think, to feel like the trajectory is going down. But Nebraska blew that out of the water. Nebraska did what it needed to be done for the remainder of December when a lot of the pieces were rebuilt. And then progressively through the offseason to get to a place here today that is at a closer location to the peak. The peak is way up there. It's you can see it through the clouds, but they're higher on the climb right now, I will say unequivocally, than at any point in 2024.
I completely agree. I think there's a bunch of stuff that gives people optimism. I mean, for me, it's a couple things. Obviously, they did a really good job in the transfer portal to get rid of that stink kind of at the postseason part that you mentioned, where you're losing coaches and you're like, what's going to happen here? But Dana Holgorsen, I think, gives you a pretty high floor. And then I think we talked about that sophomore class, those second year, third year guys.
Yeah.
And that's the base, and that's the core of your team, and they got a lot of hits there. So I think the floor is certainly higher than it ever has been.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go back and examine more about the class of 2024 because we kind of stumbled into that yesterday, just how many key pieces there are in that group. And when they're going into their second year, clearly that you have something brewing there. What could that be a year from now? We'll see. Okay, so to finish this discussion, then I asked myself, is it closer than at any time in the Scott Frost era? Legitimately closer. I prefaced this question in part by saying, okay, what's the national view? And if you're using that as a gauge, then I think it's either 2019 or 2021. There was a lot of excitement about Nebraska in 2021 going into the season. And Nebraska showed through the year that it wasn't that far off when it lost every game, seemingly by 3 points. But I think there were cracks in the foundation that caused Nebraska to consistently lose like that. And if you want to really analyze it, on a post-mortem kind of world, that team, it wasn't together enough. That the program wasn't put together well enough to support a team that made a leap beyond where Nebraska was last season. Could that 2021 team have gone 7-6? Yeah. Could it have gone 9-3? I don't think so. Could this team go 9-3? I think it's out there for them to achieve. So I think they're higher right now than 2021 and probably higher than 2019. With 2019, what we were looking at was excitement from the end of the year before, a young quarterback who had a lot of flaws, but looked really good at the end of his freshman year. And then just general year two stuff. So I think they're even above that. If you really want to examine and do a full analysis of the program.
I agree. Looking back in hindsight, those were both really thin, in 19 and 21. And the reason, by the way, that I said 19 instead of 21 was just because so much had happened already going into 21. I'm like, ultimately, I got a lot of information under my belt right now, and I'm not sure if Scott Frost is going to be able to do this. And in 19, I didn't know that yet. Going into 19, I didn't know that yet. So that's why I said 19. But you're right. I mean, it was head coach, it was quarterback, and this one is probably closer to offensive coordinator and quarterback. But I just think they're I think if those three teams played each other in a round robin format, we'll see what happens. But I do think this team would probably give them a run just because of their depth. I think it feels solid at pretty much every position. There's a couple outliers, but the depth and the experience is in a place where it just really hasn't been for a while. So that should raise your floor, significantly.
We could go ask Javen Wright and Turner Corcoran about those 2019 and 2021 teams since they were there. They were around the program.
They were there in 2004, right? Okay.
I think so. I think Turner Corcoran was being recruited in 2019. But all right, Javen Wright was there. That wraps up that discussion. Let's come back and talk a little bit about what is going on Tuesday in Lincoln when Nebraska gets back out to practice and we get to hear from a few coaches and players in the aftermath. That is next on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
All right, but first a word from 5 Hour Energy, and it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion, bringing the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, there's a hole-in-one for your energy game. So some days on the course or off the course, because I would argue that transfusions taste delicious whether you are on or off the course. You just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. But specifically, yes, it is a golf drink, and there is no doubt about it. You want to just distill that refreshing flavor into a small shot and get that energy from it. Well, guess what? 5 Hour Energy has got the exact thing for you. Golf is all about good times with good people and great flavors. The grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through and order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. All right, into week 2 of preseason camp for Nebraska football. Today, post-practice, the media will hear from John Butler and Addison Williams. And there are questions to ask those guys, I think, for, specific. Well, I mean, you have the former coach of the secondary and the coach of the secondary, which is sort of fascinating in that regard. But they'll get different questions this time around. But weirdly, Mitch, I mean, not weirdly, but like the questions are going to be, in my opinion, I'm curious about the depth, the real life depth of that secondary. And it's growing into, I think, one of the positions that could be your strength of the team, strength of the defense, at the very least, the back end of that defense with how old, experienced they are, and then some young depth coming up behind it. I think there's interesting topics with both these guys today.
Yeah, we have to turn our heads, turn our antennas a little bit, because so much of the talk through the first week and day or so of camp has been about the offense. And I think that's natural. And it's even exaggerated this year because of Dana Holgorsen and how interesting his addition is and still somewhat new. So we've asked Matt Rhule a lot about the offense. We've heard from Dana Holgorsen. We heard from Dakeil Shorts. Dylan Raiola, of course, was on center stage at Big Ten Media Days. They took two of the 3 players to Vegas. Were on the offensive side. The offensive line has been a topic. The main injury in preseason camp so far was at the tight end spot, which has been a topic. So yeah, we turn our attention here on Tuesday to the defense, and like, what is the biggest question about the Nebraska defense? Like, it's always with Matt Rhule, just kind of a given that his team is going to play solid defense. But I'm scratching my head a little bit in trying to determine other than the obvious, like, all right, how do you find depth on the defensive line?
Right.
Like, what's the rotation system going to be to keep everybody fresh so that you can hold up against the run up front? How have the young players looked? How are the transfers meshing in? I mean, I guess that's a few questions right there, but I don't feel like there's a lot of originality in those. Like, it's the same kind of stuff we were asking in the spring. So I'm crowdsourcing here a bit. What should we ask John Butler on Tuesday, or what are we going to come at? Many people will listen to this podcast probably after John Butler has already talked. So what are we going to be talking about Wednesday when we review John Butler's first visit with the media of August?
Probably a little bit too early to tell, but I think there's, for me anyway, there's a lot of interest in the non top line secondary group, right? The non-Malcolm Hartzog and Deshaun Singleton, guys who have been around for a long time, that group, like we talked extensively in the offseason about how much depth they've built. And remember the talk about how, they kind of are just overdoing it at that position, and then they're weeding out, the guys who won't
recruiting,
be here. Yeah, they even took a transfer and he left immediately, right? So I think you're seeing the fruits of that a little bit. So I guess I want to know how hard those young guys are coming along here in fall camp. Like I said, might be a little bit too early to tell, but by the end of the year, is somebody challenging for a spot that has been held down by one guy for 2 or 3 years or something like about that. And then I think, for the linebackers too, even though, Rod Varchek isn't talking today, it's sort of a similar situation. There's some young guys, but those guys have, like Shavers, that guy is going to be a stalwart of the defense. So I think there's a bunch of interesting developing storylines with that defense, and there's also a lot of unknown about the big picture. What is it? What does it look like? What's its strength? Is it explosive enough? Can it hold up enough? Right? All those things. Are teams going to try and get big and run at you? I think there's a lot in there for the defense.
2 names I want to ask about today that have come up very briefly in the first week, and we didn't hear a lot about in the spring on the defensive side, since we're going to be somewhat focused on the secondary with Addison Williams answering questions. Jameer Khan, who played at Southern Illinois for the past 2 seasons in the FCS and was a productive defensive back, and then transferred to Nebraska last winter. And then Justin Rhett. Yeah. Justin Rhett from Georgia at safety is somebody whose name has hardly come up at all. And I don't think that's because he's not out there and isn't ready. Like, I don't think that's it at all. I think that Nebraska just has answers at safety in what you and I would think the safety spot is going to look like going into September, because you have Marquise Buford and Malcolm Hartzog and Deshaun Singleton, who seemingly have manned. Well, some of those guys have played corner, but like, those are the safeties, some of the most experienced players in your program, and they all are set to play safety this year. So you pencil them in. But what about a guy like Justin Rhett? Like, he's coming from Georgia, man. He's got a great pedigree and should be able to push some of those players. So I'm curious if that's happening, both with Justin Rhett and with Jameer Khan. Like, we've heard that it seems that Andrew Marshall has made a step up at corner. So is he entrenched as the corner opposite Sierra Wright? Because I don't know. Like, Donovan Jones, also, there are good things being said about him after the practice on Saturday night in the stadium. And we heard somebody, I believe it was Singleton at Big Ten Media Days, who said that Jeremiah Charles is the guy at that corner spot who is somebody to watch this year, because he's made the decision to go to the next level with his commitment and his belief in himself. So, are you truly going to be too deep across the secondary with players who you can insert at any moment, or are we getting ahead of ourselves and suggesting that?
I mean, I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer in that stock. I mean, there's some things where I get a little bit skeptical of this is going to be really good. I just think when you go out of your way, like some people have this fall, to say we not only have old experienced guys back there who have played a lot of football and we'll see what we get from them, but we also have these young guys and they're pushing them. I think that means something. I think it looks, almost similar along the offensive line. Not that there's this huge young group that's coming along, but you can go 7, 8, 9, 10 deep there and feel really good because all those guys have played. That's what you want. That's what you want a position to look like, right? That's what it looks like. Not necessarily in the terms of talent or if they're 5 stars or whatever, but if you look around at some of the best programs in the country, at the top is guys who have played before and they've been around and they're all conference caliber dudes, and then right behind them are young guys who are pushing them, right now. So and they're pushing for playing time a lot too. It's hard to keep those guys off the field. That's exactly what you want to hear. And I think we'll hear a little bit of that today with the DBs.
All right, let's get out of here on this Tuesday. Send us your mailbag questions for our Friday show. We'll be back with you the rest of this week. You can hit us on the mailbag, lockedonneb@gmail.com. That's the best way to get a mailbag question in. I was supposed to ask you today about your fascination with packets of hot sauce from Pancheros in Iowa, but we'll get to that later this week as well. I don't know what that's about. For now, thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith is there with the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to college football. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.